Hey, I hope you guys are doing good today. We are going to be watching Surviving a Medieval Winter. I will say, based off of the thumbnail, this looks kind of cozy to me. If you do get a chance, I'd appreciate if you can leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch, and I will have Max's video linked in my description below, so be sure to give him a like and subscribe as well. Absolutely love his channel. All right, let's get on into it.
There was a medieval proverb that said, "Winter eateth what summer groweth." And so to survive a medieval winter, people would have to stockpile the foods that they had growing in the summer. Then all winter long they could make dishes like frumenti, a wheat porridge perfect for keeping away the cold.
Oh, a wheat porridge. Okay. I do think I'm a big fan of porridge. I mean, I like oatmeal. I like plain oatmeal, so I feel like this is gonna be right up my alley.
So thank you to Bombas for sponsoring this video as we try to survive a medieval winter, this time on Tasting History. Frumenti is one of those dishes that would have been eaten by all members of society, from a serf to a monk to the king himself. That said, there were definitely differences between the version served to a peasant and the one at a royal banquet. Now, both of them would have been a wheat or sometimes barley porridge mixed with egg and milk, but in some of the nicer recipes you find a lot of spices or even sugar. Other recipes might include venison stock or even call for the dish to be served with a side of venison. There's even one recipe in the form of curry from England that calls for the frumenti to be served alongside porpoise. Definitely a dish reserved for royalty. But I'm not concerned with how the royals will survive winter. I trust they'll be just fine. I'm more concerned with how the average person would have eaten. And so I wanted to find a simple frumenti recipe, and I did so in the French cookbook Le Viandier de Thévent, written around the year 1300. It's for fomenter. Take wheat, prepare it, wash it very well, and cook it in water. When it is cooked, drain it. Take cow's milk and bring it to a boil, add the wheat, and boil it again, stirring frequently. Remove it from the fire, stir often, and add in plenty of beaten egg yolks.
I would have never thought to add egg yolks like this. And I mean, I guess I've never really had porridge either, but this sounds good. It sounds nice.
It should not be too hot when they are added. Some people add spices, a little saffron and venison stock. It should be yellowish and quite thick. So even this recipe gives the option for a fancier frumenti, saying that it can be made with spices and venison stock or saffron, though the saffron is actually just there to color it if the egg yolks don't do enough. That said, I'm guessing most peasants really didn't care what the color of the dish was in the end, so they probably wouldn't bother adding any saffron. They were more just concerned with keeping warm. So it's a pity that they didn't have access to these comfy slippers that I got from today's sponsor, Bombas. Bombas produces...
Oh, I have Bombas socks. They're very nice.
Some of the comfiest slippers, socks, underwear, and t-shirts. And everything is made with premium materials and fits like a glove, or like a sock. And should it not fit, well, then you can return it, because you can return it for free or exchange it for absolutely any reason at all, but I am sure that you won't want to, because I've been happy with everything that I've got from them. My favorite t-shirt is now Bombas, my favorite socks are now Bombas. I just got another pair of compression socks from Bombas, because I'm getting ready to go on a long flight, and the best thing to wear on a long flight is compression socks. And it's not just about getting you a wonderful article of clothing, but also helping others get them too, because for every item sold, they donate an item to those in need. Namely, socks, underwear, and t-shirts, the most requested items at shelters. One item purchased is one item donated. So
I forgot about that. I forgot about that, about this company, that they do that. That is really nice.
Do good with Bombas, knowing that your purchase will do some real good. And new customers get 20% off of their first order when you use my link in the description or go to bombas.com/tastinghistory and use my code tastinghistory20. Now on to the porpoiseless frumenti. So for this recipe, what you'll need is 1 cup or 200 grams of wheat berries, 1 cup...
I can't say I've ever had wheat berries either. I mean, this looks nice though. Looks nice.
So for this recipe, what you'll need...
I do like barley too. So, I mean... all of, like, everything that is being listed here, I mean, I feel like this is something that I think I would really enjoy.
Is 1 cup or 200 grams of wheat berries, 1 cup or 235 milliliters whole milk or almond milk, Almond milk would have been used during fasting days and during Lent, which is mostly during the winter, so you can use almond milk, but if you do that, then you really shouldn't be using egg yolks. But I'm not making this during Lent, so I'm using regular milk and 3 egg yolks. Also a half teaspoon of salt and some optional saffron. Now, the French recipe does not actually mention salt, but it would have been commonly used at the time, and it is mentioned in a wonderful recipe from 1430 along with sugar, and my favorite thing about the recipe is that it's told like a poem. Colour it with saffron and salt it well, and serve it forth, sir, at the meal. With sugar candy thou mayest douse, if it be served in a great lord's house. Take black sugar for meaner men, beware therewith, for it will burn.
Oh, I love that. I actually love how this is worded. You know, some of these old recipes, when they do it like this, I love it. I love it.
So here again, it says that if it is being made for a great lord, you can go ahead and add some sugar, or even black sugar, which is just a less refined version of sugar, if it is being served to meaner men or somebody with less wealth. But I'm not going to use any, but if you want to sweeten it up, then you can. It will still be historically accurate. So first, rinse the wheat and then drain it. Then bring a quart of water to a boil and add the wheat in. Let it return to a boil, then reduce the heat to a simmer, cover the pot, and leave it to simmer for another 30 minutes or until it's nice and soft. By this time, most of the water should have been absorbed, and any that hasn't been, you can drain off. Now, some recipes, like the one that calls for porpoise, has you add the egg yolks to the milk before heating the milk up. Now, you can add it later, like this recipe says, but you run the risk of having them curdle or scramble, basically, scrambled eggs. That is not good. So if you want to mitigate that, then you should add the egg yolks to the milk right now. Just beat them and add them to the milk as well as the salt. Also, if you do want to add some ground...
I need to get myself one of these little whisks because I feel like... This would be so nice to have. I don't have a little one. I just have like a regular size one. I really need a little one.
them and add them to the milk as well as the salt. Also, if you do want to add some ground saffron to make it more colorful, then you can do so now. Either way, pour it into a small pot and set it over low heat and slowly bring it to a simmer. Again, you don't want to end up with scrambled eggs, so make sure you're doing a slow heating. Once it starts to steam, then add in the wheat and raise the temperature to medium and let it continue to come to a gentle boil, stirring it so it doesn't burn to the bottom of the pot as it thickens. And
I think this looks good. I think this looks really good. I like everything that's in this. I think this is going to be delicious.
Once it's thickened, it is ready to eat. And the original recipe does mention that it should be nice and thick. As my Nana would say, it should stick to your ribs. And it should do that because that way it'll stay with you, keep you warm through a medieval winter. There was a period from around the year 900 to 1300 where Europe was uncharacteristically warm, and they gave it the clever name of the medieval warm period. But starting around 1300, everything changed.
Winter is coming.
This was the beginning of what later would be more cleverly called the Little Ice Age. And while this period wouldn't see its coldest temperatures until around the 17th and 18th century, the 14th century kicked off with some wicked winters. In 1303, 1306, and 1307, much of the Baltic Sea froze over, and in the winter of 1363 to 64, there were long stretches of the Rhine River that froze solid for 2 months straight. And
it was frozen solid for 2 months straight. Oh my gosh. I mean, like, nowadays, you know, when stuff like that happens, it's not the end of the world. But like back then, I mean, that's a big deal. That is a big deal.
There were long stretches of the Rhine River that froze solid for 2 months straight. And while you might expect that kind of weather in Northern Europe, Southern Europe also faced winter's wrath. In the winter of 1216, the Po River in Italy froze over solid, so much so that they were able to have a jousting tournament on it. And in February of 1352, the city of Florence in Italy was blanketed with snow for the entire month. A contemporary wrote that the snow rose to an extraordinary height. So to lighten up the roofs, the snow was thrown into the street, and some of the towns were blocked so the inhabitants were trapped for several days in their homes.
I believe that. I mean, you know, winter weather is something that can be so crazy. You know, it could be mild for decades, and then all of a sudden, you know, you just get slammed with some snow.
I'm really hoping that that's not the case when I go to Florence next month because I am not prepared for that kind of weather. Now, I'm sure that these harsh winters were hard on absolutely everyone, but there were some who were better prepared to handle them. I mean, a castle can be drafty, sure, but at least you have a raging fire in pretty much every room, tapestries on the walls to hold in the warmth, and of course, plenty of warm clothing to wear. Now, often this disparity, of course, had to do with money, but sometimes it was simply because of your social status. Regardless of if you could afford it or not, you weren't allowed to wear certain types of clothing.
Oh, I did not know that. So, like, if you could have worn something warmer, but I guess you can't because of your class, that's messed up. Damn.
If you could afford it or not, you weren't allowed to wear certain types of clothing. In the sumptuary laws from England in 1363, there were rules set in place that said that certain types of fabric, as well as certain types of fur, sometimes fur at all, could not be worn by the majority of society, regardless of if they could actually afford it or not.
Gosh, that's so wild though to think about. I mean, like, it's not surprising that, you know, crazy stuff like this existed, but then it's like you're freezing your nerds off. You should be able to wear some fur. I mean, so you know you're not cold. if you can afford it and stay warm, yeah, I feel like that should be okay. But you know, that's just kind of how it was back then, which is it's so wild to think about.
But winter wasn't just about keeping warm, but keeping fed. That same year that the jousting tournament took place on the frozen Po River, an Italian chronicler wrote that it was so cold that bread, apples, and pears, and all manner of food froze solid, and it could not be cut or eaten until they had been warmed up and thawed out by a fire. They even said that the wine froze in the casks, and to get it out, they had to hack at it with an axe. When rivers...
Well, you just have like a wine slushy. Nope, problem solved. Wine slushies for everyone.
Froze in the casks, and to get it out, they had to hack at it with an axe. When rivers froze, especially in areas that were unaccustomed to that kind of weather, it made distributing the food that they did have very difficult, as much of the food would have gone by boat down those rivers. In addition, the freezing would damage the watermills, which in the medieval period were numerous, and this meant that grain couldn't be ground into flour, so instead of bread, you had to eat something like the frumenti that we're making today. But while there were those who were caught unawares by the cold, most people took heed of the words of House Stark and knew that winter was coming, and so they would prepare during the warmer months to last out the winter. They would stockpile their wheat and barley, and to protect it from rodents and from the damp, they would first lay down a layer of gorse or another thorny plant on the floor of the barn, and this kept the grain raised off the wet floor, and the thorns made it more difficult for vermin to come up through the boards. Now, when it came to meat, you would pretty much not be eating anything fresh. The summer and fall were the time to fatten the livestock, and then come November, it was time to slaughter them. For many people, the festival of Martinmas on November 11th was one of the last big feasts of the year that would include fresh beef. Once everyone had had their fill, then everything else was going to be saved for winter. And this is where they really excelled at preparation, because pretty much all parts of the animal could be preserved. Certain organ meat would be pickled, while the blood would be made into blood sausages and black puddings, which, when kept cool, could last for months. Then
I mean, you know, this is all very resourceful. This is all very, very resourceful. This is great. I mean, you know, when you have to plan accordingly, I think it's actually kind of impressive to see how people did all this back then, because, you know, we have, you know, we got deep freezers and all kinds of stuff nowadays. So it's kind of cool to look back on history and see how people made it through winters and like what they kind of did to prepare what they were, you know, pickling or making, you know, like the blood sausage here, and having stuff that could last months and months, you know. I think that's pretty cool.
Into blood sausages and black puddings, which, when kept cool, could last for months. Then the majority of the meat was destined to be either dried, smoked, or salted.
Yeah.
Meat could be made into sausages and then hoisted over smoking fires. Often you could just hang them in the rafters of your own house, because even though you would have a hole in the roof to let the smoke out from the fire, it was still pretty filled with smoke up in the rafters, because the chimney had been invented, but it was mostly in just a handful of stone buildings at this time. So the roof was pretty much filled with smoke, which was great for smoking sausages. Brilliant.
That sounds brilliant. I mean, like that does seem like it works. That also sounds a little dangerous. Also sounds a little bit dangerous.
So the roof was pretty much filled with smoke, which was great for smoking sausages. Brilliant. But the majority of the meat was destined for being brined or salted. They would either brine the meat or in addition to that, pack it tightly in salt and store it for months or sometimes even longer. The great news was that it would last throughout the winter. The bad news was that all your meat was really salty and really tough. And this is why, especially during the winter, everything was boiled. During the summer, you might see fresh meat being roasted, but mostly during the winter, it had to be boiled for a few hours before just to make it edible. It was not uncommon, even during the summer, to boil meat before roasting it, because medieval Europe just loved boiled meat. Now, some cows, along with some goats and sheep, would be kept back to make more cows, goats, and sheep the next year, as well as to provide the house with milk, butter, and cheese. Butter and cheese being an excellent way to preserve the milk, but again, it would have been very, very salted at this period, both the butter and the cheese. Most of the animals, though, were slaughtered come November, though there were two that got a month of reprieve: geese and pigs. And this was because once fall hit, you didn't have to feed them anymore. Instead, they were allowed to gorge themselves on worms and acorns until December. But come December, they too were destined for the butcher block, which is why in many calendars from the medieval period, December includes images of pigs being slaughtered. Pork was a very important...
That makes sense. I mean, I mean, this is just the way of life, and as as long as you're not wiping it all out, because you want to keep having them make babies and stuff, so you can keep it going. But I mean, it kind of sounds like they had a pretty good rotation going. So I think I mean everything that they're doing here, it sounds good to me.
Medieval period, December includes images of pigs being slaughtered. Pork was a very important meat for most people to see them through the winter because, frankly, most people didn't have access to cows because they were very, very expensive. Pigs, on the other hand, most people could afford to keep at least a few around. But keeping them around through winter, well, that was a different story because every pig was just another mouth to feed, and so most of them were destined to become salt pork or bacon before Christmas. But what about fish, you may ask? Surely everyone could just go catch some fish in a stream or a pond throughout the winter, right?
Not if it's frozen.
Well, no. In many places, the common peasant was actually forbidden to fish.
Well, fair enough. I guess, during the warmer seasons, if it was illegal to fish, then there's that too. Dang. But you'd think you'd be doing the same thing, like, not overfishing, but having enough, and then you can, dry it and do whatever you need to do with it. So that could be an extra protein and fat. But clearly that's not what happened.
In many places, the common peasant was actually forbidden to fish no matter the time of year. If you lived on a lord's land, and pretty much everyone lived on a lord's land because that's kind of how feudalism worked, then it would be up to that lord if he would allow you to fish in his ponds, rivers, and streams, and the vast majority said no. There were a handful of estates during the Middle Ages that did allow their tenants to fish at will in their streams and whatnot, but that was the exception and not the rule. Now, if you...
Well, those ones seems like at least they were doing something kind of right, letting the people fish, because I feel like, like as long as you're not overfishing to where, you have like a population of your fish problem, I think you would want this for your people, and it would probably make the people a little bit more happy with you.
You did happen to live near the ocean, well, that was pretty much fair game for the most part, but fishing on the ocean during the winter was pretty dangerous, namely because of the weather. But just because you didn't get fresh fish during the winter, that doesn't mean you didn't get any fish, because just like the meat, you could have preserved fish. Herring, for example, were often salted or pickled and could be kept through the winter and sold to those living inland, and then there were the infamous stockfish, which was usually made of cod. Stockfish was not salted, but dried and cured in a process of fermentation. This fish could last for years and years on end.
Oh, wow.
But it was so hard and dried that it had to be beaten with a mallet, kind of like hardtack. And once it was softened up, it usually had to be boiled just like the salted meat for a very long time just to make it edible.
For how tough this sounds, that sounds like like boiled fish leather.
It had to be boiled just like the salted meat for a very long time just to make it edible. In the book of Marjorie Kemp from the early 15th century, she tells a story of Jesus coming to her and saying, "Thou shalt be eaten and gnawed by the people of the world, as any rat gnaweth the stockfish. Daughter, for you are so buxom to my will, and cling as sore unto me as the skin of stockfish clings to a man's hands when it is boiled." Lovely. Really paints a picture. Though I actually...
That's so true. This is a wild entry, but I don't hate it. I would read more of this.
Clings to a man's hands when it is boiled. Lovely. Really paints a picture. Though I actually really want to try stockfish and I want to actually make it. It requires a lot of planning, but maybe that's an upcoming long-term project for the channel. Now, surviving a winter during the Middle Ages did mean mostly a diet of dried and preserved foods, but there were some fresh, or at least non-preserved foods that you could eat. Things like chestnuts, walnuts, almonds, and hazelnuts were typically eaten throughout the winter and were especially important during Lent. This 40-day period during the winter meant a complete abstention from meat, eggs, and dairy. Now, the meat part wasn't so hard because a lot of people had actually eaten through most of their meat by the time Mardi Gras came around. But the dairy was a little bit harder because milk was used in a lot of dishes and a lot of cooking during the period, so they would have to make almond milk or hazelnut milk, and they're actually made pretty much the same way that they're done today, though some were made with water, but many times, instead of water, it would be made with beer or wine.
Ooh.
Another fresh item that you might eat would be a fresh fruit or vegetable on occasion. Most, of course, would be long gone or else dried to within an inch of its life by now, but things like apples and pears were often able to last into the cold of February, and vegetables such as cabbages and leeks were commonly grown and harvested throughout even the snowiest months. Then there were radishes, which according to the 13th century scholar Bartholomeus Anglicus, or Bartholomew the Englishman, were most important to eat during the winter. See, medicine was still based on the idea of the four humors, which were kept in balance partly by eating foods designated hot, cold, wet, and dry. Well, the ravages of winter, which was considered to be wet and cold, could be combated with a hot, dry food, which radishes were considered. Heat burns.
I like radishes. I like kimchi radishes too. That's like my favorite. Like the kimchi radishes. Ugh, love them. I love those.
With a hot, dry food, which radishes were considered. Heat burns in the fat matter of the root. In winter it is a reservoir of heat, and gathers itself to another and is multiplied. So to survive a medieval winter, it was all about preparation, gathering up enough food that it could see you through those coldest months, because most people did not have the ability to buy a lot of food. But if you lived in a city or even a large town, you might not have the space to store all of that food or even grow it in the first place, so you were going to have to buy your food, and it was going to cost you.
Oh,
Except for those few items with government price controls, namely ale and bread, all other food prices rose during the winter. For instance, should you find yourself having to travel and stay the night at an inn, you would have to pay not only for your own food, but also that of the horse you rode in on, supposing you weren't on foot. Well, in the 1340s in England, stabling your horse for the night and having them fed would cost about 1.5 pennies during the summer and 3.5 during the winter.
Ooh.
And not only did food prices rise during the winter, but your wages actually shrank. Winter meant that there were fewer hours in the day, and this meant that your daily wages would be cut.
Yeah, so you're working less, you're making less, and everything costs more. I mean, that sounds like that's how they would do you, for sure.
For instance, in London in the 1340s, a tiler, that is someone who made floor tiles and roof tiles, would earn 5.5 pennies in the summer, but only 4.5 during the winter. So between the rise in prices and the cut in pay, the average city dweller during the period could spend over 70% of their income just on food. And there is a wonderful quote from Bartholomew the Englishman about this. It's actually about plants and whatnot growing, but it works with your savings as well. He says that all things that lived and sprang by the benefit of summer fade and die by the hard cruelness of winter. And that's why instead of some succulent chicken or spiced roast pork for this winter episode, I decided to make this simple porridge for a medieval peasant. And here we are, frumenti from the 14th century.
I think this looks good, honestly. I think this looks good. It sounds very basic, simple. Those are things I really, really like. And it seems like it does look very thick, which is not a bad thing either.
So it does have this yellowness to it, which I kind of love. And you could have made it even more yellow with more saffron or more egg yolks. Here we go. Interesting. Now, does it need sugar and spices? I think it would really help, but it's actually much more flavorful than I had expected because of the eggs. Because the wheat, kind of bland, but the eggs add this like richness to it. So I can see why it would be a lot more filling than just something like oatmeal.
Right.
There is, I mean, it's like packed with calories. So probably a much smaller bowl would do.
But that would be important though. You know, if you could eat this in the mornings and this could last you like a really good majority of your day before you really got hungry again. I mean, it's during the winter time, and if you're working and doing whatever else that you have to do, or even just staying warm in general, I mean this that sounds like this would be really good. It looks good. I definitely want some.
So it's actually really good. And I can see that this would keep you warm and full all day long, no matter what, really. I also really love the texture. It's not mushy. The wheat berries have kind of held themselves together, and so each one kind of like pops in your mouth, I guess. Like they're soft enough to eat, but not so soft that they become just mush.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like that. I would probably add a little sugar or some cinnamon or other spices that they would have been using at the time. But yeah, it's actually better than I had expected. So make some frumenti, keep warm, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
I think this video was really cool. And it also kind of gave us like a pretty cool insight of, you know, how people made it through the winter in medieval times. Because, you know, back then, you know, I feel like winters were always, you know, one of like the more interesting parts of history, just because, you know, weather can be so drastic and kind of brutal, you know. But as far as the food goes, I think this looks really good. Let me know, like, have you guys made this? What do you guys put in it? Do you do like cinnamon sugar? Could you like put like a pat of butter on it and mix it in like with, you know, maybe like a little bit more salt or something? I don't know. I have to ask these questions because I'm a very plain person when it comes to a lot of things. Like, you know, if you see my other videos, I always say I love plain oatmeal. I like really plain cream of wheat. Like I'll put like I'll mix like a little bit of butter in. Same with like grits and stuff. But like I like kind of bland food sometimes. So, but I feel like you could probably do a lot with this though. I feel like you could probably, you know, spice it up pretty well. But let me know if you guys have made this and what else did you guys put in it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to go and like and subscribe to Tasting History with Max Miller. He just does an amazing job with these videos. Pretty much everything always looks good. So I really appreciate his channel. So be sure to give him lots of support. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys had a great day, and I will see you in the next one.